Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L'Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching.
Last week's episode, burnout came up, and since then it's just kind of been showing up throughout the week through various things that have happened in my own world. So I'm just going to start there and try to then go to framing burnout. But I have managed to be overscheduled in certain ways this time of year, as I know many people are, because this time of year adds in more into what we're already doing often, and which has caused some stress, some sickness, like just virus, not feeling well, and then has also caused me to be late to things too. So clearly burnout this time of year is something that many people may relate to, whether that is families with a lot of young kids' performances this time of year, to work and end of quarter work tasks that need to get done, to all of the additional holiday travel and kind of relationships that are built during this time of year too. So understandably, burnout within this fall to winter timeframe tends to really show up both personally for me as well as for my clients too. And I hear the phrase a lot lately from other people: I'm tired, I'm doing too much, I'm tired. And it's interesting because yesterday a woman mentioned that you are, for lack of better words, kind of blessed with these fruits, which would be like your strengths, and how you are using them and how you're actually showing up with those in the world can definitely relate to burnout. Because if we are overburdened or overtasked with things, then that can make it really hard for us to show up as our best selves, doing the work that we love. And it's not that we have to show up as our best selves, but when we're burnt out, we tend to then do the work that we love from a space of hurriedness, from a space of a little bit of fear, potentially, from a space of just get it done so I can move on to the next thing, from a space of I don't want to be here. And while those energies may not be overtly shown, they can be felt both by others and clearly oneself as they navigate this more full time of year. So today we're going to take a look at that, look at what is burnout, what does it mean to carry that into other parts of our work, into our daily lives. And then also we're going to provide some hope with how can we, use burnout as a tool for growth, as a tool for healing, and more. So L'Shawn, I know you mentioned burnout last week too in our episode. So what's coming up for you with burnout?
Yeah, I think what comes up for me is the idea of how can we get ahead of burnout? Like often what happens with me personally is that I find myself burned out, and I feel like, oh, if I had known the warning signs ahead of time, then I would have been able to mitigate the effects of being overworked, overcommitted. And then you get to this point where you can't go anymore. So what burnout feels like for me, it's just like, you're running on fumes, and then eventually those fumes run out and there's nothing more that can really fuel your desire to get stuff done. And so it's just a point at which you're unable to find the joy or the energy to do the things that you need to do, and you're doing it, but it's so much work. It's just so heavy. It's a very heavy feeling to be burned out. And then there's that sense of, when is this going to be over? When can I have a rest? And then, like you said, Eryn, what happens is our bodies often answer that and say, yeah, I can give you rest. Here's the flu.
Yeah.
Here's something to make it so that you cannot move. You have to rest. And one of the things that comes to mind is, what can I do, or what can we do to get ahead of that burnout? Because this time of year is a busy time of year. Not only do you have your normal routine that you have, but there's also the things that are tacked on to holidays. And Eryn, you mentioned if you have kids who are doing things like sports or other extracurricular activities, like if they're in music or they're performing, there's a lot of, this is a time of year where, you have winter concerts and recitals and playoffs and all kinds of things that happen this time of year. It's like you almost want to like say, hey, this is the time of year where we are winding down and also winding up for the holidays, for the end of the year. It's just so interesting that we have all these things that happen all at the same time. Do you think people would be like, well, maybe we shouldn't do playoffs at the same time as, Thanksgiving and that kind of thing. Maybe we shouldn't have a winter recital, or maybe we should do it a little bit earlier so that people don't have all these things stacked together. But you know that these things are coming up. So what can we do to include self-care and also just anticipating, hey, I've got a really busy month coming up. So what can I do to make sure that I stay healthy, that I stay energized, and that I am ahead of these really busy times? Or maybe I can schedule things so that it's an on week and an off week, or an on weekend and an off weekend. So those are some of the things that are coming to mind, Eryn. And I think that with coaching, it really lends itself to, when you're working with your client and saying, hey, we're coming up to the holidays and things are getting really hectic, or things can get really hectic. So what are some things that we can do to plan the week or plan the month so that we have time scheduled in, that we're intentional about taking care of ourselves and making sure that we give ourselves downtime, rest time, reflection time. Those are really important. And I think it's really easy to get preoccupied with the things that need to be done and the things that we want to get done and the things that we want to do. And we kind of, or I'll speak for myself, I tend to forget about how important it is to schedule that downtime, to schedule that, that time where I can just be in silence, or time that I can be in nature, or time that I can be active, not running around doing errands, but just maybe going out for a walk or doing something like that. So I think that's really important, just that balance. I think that's one of the things also that I think about too. When I think about burnout, burnout is a symptom of imbalance. It's a symptom of misalignment. And so those are some things that come to mind. How about you, Eryn?
Yeah, I was just getting ready to write down the symptom of misalignment and everything. But before I get there, I guess I just want to so I want to make sure I remember that. But before I get there, when you were talking about the playoffs and all of this stuff this time of year, I had this flashback moment to when we were recording prior episode in a different season, when we were talking about kind of the seasons, and how we were talking about almost the same thing about May. May, there's so much going on, so much scheduled. And so it was just this weird moment where it put me into this juxtaposition of these two. December, May are, full as they kind of close out a typical school semester potentially, and everything kind of lands in that month. And so it makes me think of like the structures and the systems that we have in place that keep us on this pattern of burnout. So I know while coaching is not as much about systems consistently as it is about, the individual and what they can do within the context of what we're working with, I do want to highlight sometimes that how can we maybe advocate for year-round schooling, for instance, or something that is spread out over the course of months as well. So that came up for me as you were talking. And then the other thing about this kind of how we inflict this on ourselves too. So it's not just the systems, it's kind of how we approach life as well. And I am probably the biggest offender because I tend to like a lot of different things. I have met some amazing people and they have a clear career path. They do that one thing really, really, really well. And maybe they have, a small friend group or something, and then just live the day-to-day kind of life. And I have never been like that, unfortunately. I envy that in some ways, that ability to just, your personality automatically aligns with boundaries, automatically aligns with planning. And so, in coaching, I think that it can be incredibly helpful for people who are like me, who have a lot of different interests, not as linear of a career path, kind of tends to overbook those things, how this time of year could be the time of year to start accessing coaching, right? For whether you're feeling burnt out yet or not. And I like your idea and your and the way you articulated that, we need to have planning and really understand what we're getting ourselves into. And that can be really hard to feel and see in advance of the busyness or before we burn out. And, I used to have somebody in my team who would always put in, like, as they were going through their calendar for the year, they'd put in their mental health days already, like each month, like one each month. And I think that that makes a lot of sense to have something like that in place, to have some type of, railing up for burnout. On the other end of it, some people just don't relate to the world that way, and it's not going to be their style. And so, how do you work with those people in coaching who tend to take on too much and don't really know what they could try? Because planning ahead in terms of like knowing, okay, maybe I could spread this out from this day to this day just isn't really an option for them yet, or an option for them with where they're at in the process of everything. So that's what I'm curious about too, is this coaching concept of, when we're in burnout, how can we support our clients when they are in burnout, but then also how can we give them some scaffolding prior to that, and then some reinforcement of that as they move throughout this time of year. So I think the best thing to consider with that is the experiential piece of coaching. Each person is designed differently and is going to need something a little bit differently to navigate burnout. So I think of burnout, because it's such a heavy topic, that it can be used in the coaching context in a really playful way. How can you play with the concept? How can you role play? Maybe the coach takes on the role of the person they're coaching, and then the person they're coaching is the coach, and then they really get to understand, wow, okay, this feels like a lot. This is too much. How can I make sure that burnout isn't a part of my life? And it's definitely a part of the season, but it's also a part of our culture, which I've mentioned. So how do we do a little thing with, or how can we be coaches who support a little bit of that countercultural piece, or that counter navigating the culture themselves too? So I guess I'll stop there because I'm starting to fumble over my words. And I'll
No, that there's a
send it
lot
back
of,
to you.
yeah, there's a lot of really good points that you're making. And I like that you bring up that, and this goes back to when we talked to Morgan Holiday about organizing, where she brought in that certain people, their brains are wired in a certain way that they can organize, that it comes naturally to them. And that's something that I didn't really think about, that maybe certain people have a tendency to see things in patterns and they're able to organize. Just that's just the way that they think, and that's their way that their brain is wired. And therefore, if they can easily see patterns and they can easily organize things, then it's easier for them to organize. And therefore, like someone like Morgan, who is a professional organizer, she can work with you and help you come up with a system that you can learn. And so I think there are things that are innate and there are things that are learned. And I think even though organizing for Morgan is innate, it is something like for someone like me, where organizing is not something that comes naturally or that's not innate, but something that can be learned. And so I think that there's something to be said about systems, and some systems are, serving us well, and others do not serve us so well. And I think that the system that we have in place in terms of our school system, and you just the way that we pack everything into, December, November, December, and even if you look at like our taxes and things like that, tax season and the different things that we have that kind of pack things in and make it very difficult for times of rest. And even by the time there is a time for rest, like, we have Christmas off if you're in the United States, and we have, different Thanksgiving if you're in the United States, we have that day off. And Not everyone has that day off though. So it really is a time where we have so much stacked up in our schedules. And then if we take into account the things that we want to do that are not part of the system, then where do you fit it in? Another thing that I really like that you brought in, Eryn, is the playfulness, the chance to be playful when we're in coaching. So when we're in coaching and we can be playful, I was thinking, when you said something about, I can't remember what it was, but one thing that I was thinking about is like maybe you could like visualize your capacity. So like if you had like a jar or something and you had stones, but you poured water in between the stones, that kind of thing. Often when I think about my day or my week, I'm thinking about it abstractly, like I need this and this and this. But then if I look at my calendar and I see all the different blocks, I'm like, that is a very, very full calendar. There's so many things that I'm doing. And then you have to take into account time to commute from one place to another. And there's all these invisible things that take our time that I don't really take into account. Some people might take into account, but we might take for granted. Like, for example, if we have a lunch date, so we have to also take into account that we've got to get there. It's not like we can just apparate there like in the Harry Potter universe,
Yeah.
if only, right? So there's all those things that we need to take into account in addition to the appointments and the events and the things that we have on our calendar. So I love the idea of playing around with that and taking some time to look at what things are important. Some people just innately can prioritize. And like you said, Eryn, have boundaries, and it's easy for them to set boundaries. And other people don't really understand boundaries, or boundaries are porous, or their boundaries are flexible and they're moving around a lot. And so there's not that consistency that comes with having this blocked out time that you can just have an easeful life, and it's not packed with so many things. So those are the things that were coming up for me when you were talking, Eryn. I love the idea of playing around with schedules and playing around with systems and visualizing. I think it's really important to visualize those things, or maybe even just thinking about strategies or non-negotiables, that kind of thing, so that when we are asked, hey, can you go to this thing or can you do this thing? And we already have a pretty full schedule, we can, come up with strategies for how we're going to decide whether or not we're going to do something. Because often is the case, things will come up and there's all these different obligations or expectations that we have in different social groups and professional groups, and they overlap sometimes. So that is a time to really think about, okay, what do I want my December to look like? I want my December to be a time of rest, or I want my December to be a time of, social. I want it to be social. I want to be seeing friends and doing things. Like if you can have like an intention for your month, then it's easier to just say no to things that don't align with that intention. Those are some thoughts that I had coming up, but I do think coaching lends itself to that activity. Working with the individual, meeting the individual where they're at, and being playful and flexible about what a good or what a satisfying December would look like for them. And then and also taking into account that everyone is different and everyone approaches things differently and they have different priorities. And coaching again is a great place to a great way to come up with that, your own unique system that works for you. So those are some of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking, Eryn.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, it made me think a lot about like the juxtaposition of the fluidity and then the structure.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes me back to, I don't remember which podcast episode this was on, but when you said the juxtaposition of the trees, bamboo tree, or no, which was it? Was it a bamboo tree?
Bamboo trees and oak tree.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And how the bamboo, while it still kind of looks rigid, has that structure, is
Mm-hmm.
flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to highlight, I was a little bit critical, I think, of the over planners of myself
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, saying, I wish I was more like this person who could have this more structure. But sometimes in a coaching session, they may be struggling more with the flexibility.
Hmm.
Whereas, so it is this, push and pull of bringing in both the structure and the systems that we have set up in our lives to support us where we're at, and then the fluidity to respond. And as you were talking, it made me think too of where we're at in our own lives versus somebody who's maybe 20, 30, 70, 80, that very different age frames, and how this is always a process that, yes, you might have systems set up in place that work for you this year, but they maybe aren't going to work very well next year because things are shifting, things are constantly in motion. And so that's what I love about coaching, because it allows you to plan for what you need in the moment, but by also being flexible to what can shift. What are the possibilities? What can we be open to as we move with burnout, as we look at the concept and try to set up our lives in a way that makes the most sense, and being open to then what we are being led to from a spiritual level or from a mysterious level, whatever you want to call it, what we are also being led to, and realizing that we are not 100% in control. So if we have these amazing systems set up, things might fall apart because we're not in control, right? In that way. But even though we're not in control, that also having the systems helps us to be able to have the space and breathing room to respond to those challenges or those things that may come up that completely shift us or change our way of being and thinking in the world. And so I like thinking about the holiday season right now as this openness to what is shifting within us and our own way of being, and how can we use that to address our burnout. Because maybe we are also burnout because we're trying to do things that worked for us in the past and they aren't working now. So how can we be open to the possibility of what could be working for us into the future? And so I guess that leaves me just with a lot of coaching questions, right? And that's the key to coaching, is asking really effective questions and sitting with the unknown and being okay with change. And then kind of bringing that back just around to the concept of burnout itself. Some people, and I don't know if I want how I want to say this, so I might, some people may some people are maybe wired to hold more and do more, and that's okay. And there's like this struggle here, because
Hmm.
when you have that personality type, typically you're used to just doing more without asking for help or support.
Hmm.
This is me playing with this concept. So this might be an overgeneralization. And so just the thought of like asking for coaching during the season or asking for help, especially for those, and I don't want to be so overgeneralized, the type A kind of like
Hmm.
doer personality type, right? Like that's what's coming to mind right now. How do we then draw those people in to create space in their lives to go back to their interdependence, to relate to one another without having to be the person to do it all? And I I don't have an answer at this point, but it's just something that comes up. I see a lot, I think, because I work a lot. Lately, I feel like I've worked with more women,
Hmm.
and a lot of them do have that kind of drive in a way.
Hmm.
So it makes me think of that too. So the other thing that came up for me was just asking you, LaShawn, now that we've
Hmm.
had a chance to kind of play with the concept of burnout or whatever,
Hmm.
what would help you this holiday season with burnout?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm thinking for me personally, the thing that would help me is just to make sure that I am intentional about my downtime and that I'm really strict about the boundary around that time so that if something comes up, possibility to meet someone or to do something, then I am mindful of the need to have that downtime, because one of the things that I'm learning with just this fall has been really busy, and a lot of things, a lot of different meetings and different social events and professional events and all kinds of things going on. And looking back at how I handled those things or how that affected me in terms of my energy levels. And just knowing that it's really important for me during this holiday season is to give myself time to rest and reflect and be okay with having days that don't have an appointment or an event, but that I am putting on my calendar, this is rest time, so that I honor that. I think that's what's going to really help me. How about you, Erin?
I love the idea of honoring rest, and it's a non-negotiable, and like really internalizing that piece. One thing I've noticed is just kind of those small moments to help me reset. And this time of year, I like the scents, like the pine and the gingerbread. I don't know, all of those smells just are really a good reset and a good reminder. So
Mm,
I think just doing those small things to like let in those sensory things. But then on the other end of it too, just I know this is what's gonna help me here. So
mhm,
I always tend to just like say yes for like if my kids are like, I want to try this or I want to try that, da, da, da.
mhm.
And I can be, I have some critical thinking capabilities, but on the other end of it, like sure, because I like to be open to possibilities,
Mhm,
right? And that's a strength of mine. But on the other
mhm.
end of it, it's like, whoa, when you say anything, just pause.
Mhm,
And I'm talking to myself right now. Before I say anything, you know, just pause and say yes or no. And also be mindful of what I might need if I say yes or no.
mhm,
And then the energy I'm bringing behind everything too is so important to me. It's becoming more and more important to me as I get older. But like, because I used to be, always like so busy and would always just do things like kind of not on rote, but just without as much mindfulness. And
mhm,
so for me, I think what I need is just that reminder of what is the energy I'm bringing to this. And if it feels too heavy, then it's probably too much for me. And how do I make a shift?
mhm,
Do I ask for help to give this over to someone? Do I take a break? Do I take a nap? Naps, lunchtime naps, 30 minutes can be really helpful for me personally. Like they are gold. So just kind of remembering those little implementations of, and I don't love the word of self-care. I just like to say care of care, right?
mhm.
That's what comes up for me.
Yeah. And my question is like, when you take the time to really think about like what's going to be most supportive or what do you need, for the holidays coming up, how does that feel when you take that time to think about what you need?
It just feels grounded, right? And I think last week we talked about that saying that I got from
Hmm.
thing that's back there about, both being grounded and heads in the clouds. And I think that, keeping both of those in mind. And I guess that goes back to, it's so interesting. Roots and wings keeps coming up over and over again lately. It came up yesterday.
Hmm.
Somebody was talking and then they specifically brought up like their own roots and wings. I was like, oh my goodness, that's yes, all of that, staying rooted and also having some flexibility and freedom. So yeah. What about you, LaShawn?
Yeah, definitely. I feel it's empowering to be able to sit down and answer that question, like what is going to be supportive or what do I need in order to avoid burnout? Just having that time to really just sit and think about what I need and what I need to be mindful of is empowering because it's like I now have an idea. It's not just going to creep up on me. It's not going to surprise me, just knowing this is what I have planned and this is what I'm thinking about and I have this vision of what I want and what's important to me. It feels empowering because there are so many things outside of our control, but what's in our control is knowing what we want, what we need, and our intentions, our expectations for the, the season, and just to be aware of that and to know that's what I'm going to be doing or that's what I want to have happen. Of course, you want to have it within the scope of what you have control over, which is your inner world, not so much your outer world. There's some certain things that you can have control over, like your environment in terms of how clean, organized it is, that kind of thing. You do have control over that, but you don't really have control over other people and systems and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an empowering feeling to sit back and be like, okay, what do I want for December? What do I want for the holidays? What's important to me? And how can I get ahead of burnout so that I'm not, completely immobilized
Yeah,
when we have time off. I want to be able to enjoy my time off. I don't want to be like
exactly.
immobilized, when
And like, it's okay to enjoy your time off. I think
yeah.
people are afraid I'm having time off and I shouldn't enjoy this. No, it is okay. It's okay to enjoy time off. And I
Yeah.
love what you said about control there. I think that's a
Hmm.
huge connector to burnout. When
Hmm.
we try to control other people or think that we can, um, that's a clear recipe for burnout.
Absolutely. Yeah. Putting your energy and your thoughts into things that you have no control over can be very exhausting and it taxing and lead to burnout very, very quickly. Very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's about that time for the coaching nugget of wisdom. Do you have anything in mind that you'd like
Yeah.
to share?
I mean, just having this conversation today was really helpful. And that's what would suggest. Get a makeup session with like a coach or a therapist or even a friend and just touch base on some of these topics that tend to come up this time of year and have a chance to really talk through them so that you can have more of a game plan, more of a plan moving forward into the next month.
Yeah, and in that vein, I really want to add just a question, just like what you had asked before about like what is going to support you or what is going to be something that you can do or something that you can set aside that's going to help you in this holiday season. What is going to support you in this holiday season? Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm LaShawn with Mayshell Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.